Picture this, April 2 and 1801. The waters of Copenhagen harbor are about to become a graveyard. 12 British ships of the line are sailing straight into what might be history's most terrifying naval gauntlet. Ahead of them, an 18-ship Danish fleet sits anchored, guns loaded, waiting. Between them, treacherous, shallow waters filled with sandbars that could rip the hull off any ship that strays even slightly off course. And leading this suicide mission, a one-eyed, one-armed British admiral who's about to pull off one of the most audacious naval victories in history. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. In the middle of the battle, his own commander is going to order him to retreat, and Nelson's response will become the stuff of legend. Welcome to the Battle of Copenhagen, where we're going to reconstruct every cannon blast, every tactical decision, and every heart-stopping moment in full three-dimensional glory. Before we dive into the chaos of battle, let me welcome you all to another episode where we bring history's greatest naval encounters to life. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're taking you through Nelson's greatest battles one by one. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And if you enjoy this deep dive into Copenhagen, give this video a like. It really helps us continue creating these massive three-dimensional reconstructions that take weeks to build. All right. Let's set the stage for one of the most complex naval battles ever fought. The year is 1801, and Britain is in trouble. Napoleon Bonaparte is consolidating power across Europe, and he's getting creative about how to strangle Britain economically. Enter the League of Armed Neutrality, a coalition of Russia, Denmark, Sweden, and Prussia, who've decided they're done with British naval dominance. They're threatening to close the Baltic Sea to British trade, which is absolutely catastrophic for Britain because the Baltic supplies crucial naval stores like timber, tar, and hemp. Without these materials, the Royal Navy can't build or maintain ships. It's basically economic warfare with the potential to cripple Britain's greatest weapon, its fleet. The British government makes a calculated decision. They're going to send a fleet to the Baltic to break up this coalition before it can properly organize. And they're going to do it with overwhelming force. The man chosen to lead this mission is Admiral Sir Hyde Parker, a cautious and aging officer. But the government knows Parker needs some firepower behind him, so they assign him a second-in-command, who's already a living legend, Rear Admiral Horatio Nelson, fresh off his stunning victory at the Battle of the Nile. Now, as our three-dimensional map zooms into the approaches to Copenhagen, you need to understand the geography here because it's absolutely critical. Copenhagen sits on the eastern shore of the island of Zealand. The city is protected by a formidable line of defense that the Danes have been preparing for weeks. They've created what's essentially a floating fortress, 18 ships and floating batteries, anchored in a line stretching for about 2 miles along the harbor. Some of these are proper warships, but others are old hulks that have been converted into stationary gun platforms. Behind this floating defense line, the city's shore batteries add even more firepower. It's a defensive position that looks almost impregnable. But here's where the geography gets really interesting. The main channel, called the King's Deep, runs between this Danish defense line and a massive sandbank called the Middle Ground. It's narrow, it's shallow in places, and navigating it while under fire is going to require seamanship of the highest order. Parker, being cautious, wants to negotiate. Nelson sees an opportunity. In the days before the battle, Nelson conducts a personal reconnaissance. He spends hours in a small boat, taking soundings, studying the Danish positions, making notes. He's looking for weaknesses, and he finds them. The Danish line, while impressive, has gaps. The ships are stationary, which means they can't maneuver. And Nelson notices that the northern end of the Danish line, closest to the city, is where the strongest ships are positioned. The southern end, that's where the older, weaker vessels are anchored. Nelson proposes a bold plan. Take 12 ships of the line, navigate them through the treacherous King's Deep, and attack the Danish line from the south, rolling it up from the weakest point to the strongest. Parker reluctantly agrees, and on the night of April 1st, Nelson transfers his flag to the HMS Elephant, a 74-gun ship of the line with a shallower draft, better suited for these waters. As night falls, let me paint you a picture of what's happening using our three-dimensional reconstruction. Nelson's 12 ships, along with numerous smaller frigates and bomb vessels, begin their approach. They're moving slowly, carefully, using the darkness to get into position. By dawn, on April 2 end, they're ready, 6 in the morning. The wind is blowing from the southeast, which is perfect for Nelson's plan. It will carry his ships up the King's Deep toward the Danish line. In our 3D view, watch as the British fleet begins its approach. Leading the line is HMS Edgar, followed by Ardent, Glatton, Isis, and others. Nelson's flagship Elephant is positioned in the middle of the line where he can best control the battle. At the rear are some of his heaviest hitters, including HMS Defiance. But almost immediately, things start going wrong. As the British ships navigate the narrow channel, 3 of them run aground on the middle ground showbar. Agamemnon, one of Nelson's favorite ships, can't even get into action. Bellona and Russell also strike the shoal, their crews desperately trying to catch them off while under increasingly heavy fire. In just minutes, Nelson has lost a quarter of his fighting power, and he hasn't even engaged the enemy yet. The remaining 9 ships press on, and at 5 a.m., the battle begins in earnest. Let me rotate our 3-dimensional view so you can see this from above. The British ships are sailing in a line, each one pulling up opposite a Danish vessel and then anchoring. This isn't a passing engagement where ships fire and move on. Nelson is deliberately stopping his ships right next to the Danish positions, turning this into a brutal point-blank slugging match. The distance between some ships is less than 200 yards. At that range, cannonballs don't just penetrate hulls, they smash completely through ships, sending deadly splinters of wood flying in all directions. The noise is absolutely apocalyptic. Imagine hundreds of cannons firing simultaneously. The sound is so loud that people reported hearing it clearly more than 20 miles away. The smoke from all these guns quickly becomes so thick that visibility drops to almost nothing. Captains are commanding their ships blind, relying on brief glimpses through the smoke and the muzzle flashes of enemy guns to know where to aim. And the Danish aren't giving an inch. This is their capital city under attack. Their families are watching from the shore. They're fighting with desperate courage, and their gunnery is excellent. British ships are being torn apart. The Monarch takes particularly heavy damage, with casualties mounting by the minute. Nelson's own flagship, Elephant, is locked in a vicious duel with the Danish ship Dannebrog, which is flying the flag of Commodore Fisher, the Danish commander. Now, here comes one of the most famous moments in naval history. It's around 1 p.m., and the battle has been raging for 3 hours. Up north, Admiral Parker, watching from a distance, sees the smoke, sees the 3 British ships aground, and assumes Nelson is being destroyed. He makes a decision. he raises signal number 39, discontinue the action. In other words, he's ordering Nelson to retreat. On Nelson's flagship, an officer nervously reports the signal. Nelson has a choice to make. If he obeys and tries to withdraw, his ships will have to navigate back through that narrow channel while under fire, and many will probably be destroyed. If he disobeys and the battle goes badly, he'll be court-martialed. Nelson turns to his flag captain and says something to the effect of, "You know, I have only one eye. I have a right to be blind sometimes." Then, in a gesture that will echo through history, he raises his telescope to his blind eye and says, "I really do not see the signal." He keeps fighting, and more than that, he raises his own signal, number 16, engage the enemy more closely. It's not just defiance, it's tactical genius. Nelson can see something Parker can't from his distant position. The Danish line is starting to crack. Several of their ships have ceased firing. The Dannebrog, the Danish flagship, is on fire. Danish crews are abandoning their positions. Over the next hour, the battle reaches its climax. The Danish resistance, while heroic, is being overwhelmed by British gunnery. But Nelson sees that continuing to pound the Danish ships, many of which are now floating wrecks filled with dead and wounded, is pointless slaughter. He makes another bold decision. He writes a letter, addressing it to the Danes and offering a ceasefire. But here's the clever part. He phrases it in a way that makes it seem like he's doing them a favor, offering them a chance to save their wounded, rather than admitting that he too needs to stop the bloodshed and secure his victory before more of his ships are destroyed. A ceasefire is arranged. The firing gradually stops, and as the smoke clears, the scale of destruction becomes apparent. Thousands of Danish sailors are dead or wounded. Multiple Danish ships are burning or sinking. But the British have also paid a heavy price. Nearly 1,000 British casualties, and those 3 ships still stuck on the middle ground are in real danger. Nelson uses the ceasefire to extract them and secure his position. Over the next few days, Nelson negotiates directly with the Danish crown prince. His combination of firmness and diplomatic skill results in Denmark agreeing to leave the League of Armed Neutrality. The coalition Britain feared never properly materializes. The Baltic remains open to British trade. Strategically, it's a complete British victory. But let me zoom out our 3-dimensional reconstruction one more time and talk about what makes Copenhagen so significant. This isn't just another naval battle. It's Nelson at his most brilliant, showing his ability to read a tactical situation, his courage in defying orders when he knows he's right, and his humanity in stopping the slaughter when victory is achieved. The turning a blind eye moment becomes part of the English language. And the battle itself demonstrates that Nelson's genius isn't just in open water fleet actions like the Nile or what's coming at Trafalgar. He can master the complexities of inshore fighting, navigate impossible waters, and adapt his tactics to whatever situation he faces. Copenhagen also shows us the human cost of these battles. When you see them represented in 3 dimensions like this, when you understand the distances involved, you realize these weren't distant artillery duels. These were close-range slaughters, where men looked into each other's faces as they killed each other. The Danish fought with incredible bravery for their homeland, and they deserve to be remembered alongside the British sailors who showed equal courage. And that's the Battle of Copenhagen reconstructed in 3 dimensions. From Nelson's careful reconnaissance to that famous moment with the telescope to his blind eye, from ships running aground to the brutal close-range combat, we've walked through every phase of this extraordinary engagement. It's a battle that shows Nelson at his most daring, most brilliant, and most humane. If you enjoyed this three-dimensional reconstruction, make sure you're subscribed because we're continuing this series on Nelson's battles. We've still got his greatest triumph ahead of us at Trafalgar. And trust me, the 3D reconstruction of that battle is going to be absolutely spectacular. Drop a comment below telling me what aspect of Copenhagen you found most interesting, or if there's another naval battle you want to see reconstructed. And if you want to support the creation of these detailed historical reconstructions, check out the links in the description below. Until next time, keep exploring history. I'll see you in the next one.